And welcome to ETF Edge, your go-to place for everything exchange-traded funds. Confused about thematic investing? You like investing in clean tech, cybersecurity, cloud computing, robotics, but not sure which ones to own or how much to allocate to each of them? Let me help you. I'm your host, Bob Pisani. Let's talk to Kristen Magoon, CEO of Amplify ETFs, who just launched the Amplify Thematic All-Stars ETF. MVPS is the symbol. It focuses on the consensus of ETFs investors who are buying thematic ETFs. Also joining us, Jay Jacobs, right here next to me at the New York Stock Exchange, head of research and strategies at thematic tech leader Global X. Christian, we have been talking about thematic tech investing for a few years now. This is an attempt to put all the hot thematic stocks into a single ETF. Describe to us what's in this ETF, how you figured out what goes in it, and is there really a compelling need for an ETF that tracks these most popular thematic stocks?
Yeah, sure thing. So there's about 140 thematic ETFs out in the marketplace today here in the US. They own about 3,200 different stocks. So it can be very confusing to understand, what thematic ETF do I buy? How do I avoid non-pure play stocks? How often should I rebalance? MVPs is an ETF that simply looks at about 160 companies out in the marketplace that are the most widely owned by the thematic ETFs across the gamut. Everything from disruptive technology to sustainability to fintech to the evolving consumer. And this is these stocks are rebalanced every month based off ETF ownership data. So the thought is this is almost like crowdsourcing a thematic core portfolio allocation from some of the smartest investors in the world, the ETF marketplace, and what they believe are the most valuable stocks and themes to have exposure to.
Now, you decided on 7 themes here, and this seems to cover all of the right bases here. Disruptive technology, evolving consumer, fintech, healthcare, innovation, industrial revolution, sustainability, and multi-theme. Does this cover all the bases for you? I mean, is there a split here? Are they equal weighted, or is it literally just a crowdsourcing situation?
Yeah, so ETF Action is the index provider, and what they've done is they've sorted all 140 thematic ETFs into one of these 7 buckets. And then these represent basically the ownership of these themes by the ETF marketplace. And then ETF Action goes and looks at the actual ownership of the underlying stocks within these themes. Some of these stocks, like an NVIDIA or Tesla, may actually be owned by multiple themes. So they do an ownership adjustment for some of these stocks. No stock can be more than 5% of the index or the ETF. And that's really how this 160 stock portfolio is put together. And it allows you to have exposure to all the different themes. And as you know, just owning all the themes is important, because if you miss some of the best days in an individual theme, you may never get that back. So MVPs gives you a chance to really own all these themes and refresh that portfolio monthly based off ETF ownership data.
Yeah, Jay, you're a leader. Global X is a leader in thematic tech investing. We've had you many times over the years to talk about this. You must have $9 or $10 billion ETFs at this point, all around thematic tech investing. So what do you think of this idea, and what is hot this year? Where are you seeing inflows into thematic tech? Not all thematic tech is the same. We know they go through periods of popularity. What's hot right now?
Well, I think what's interesting is that the kind of pure technology stocks are not necessarily what's in right now. We think of cloud computing, and we think of video games or e-commerce, some of those tech names that were really popular during the stay-at-home economy. It has kind of shifted away from that more towards what I would call kind of like tech transportation stocks. A lot of these are lithium and battery technology stocks, electric vehicle companies that are really leading the transformation of transportation going forward. A lot of that's being driven by the Biden administration. There's a $579 billion infrastructure package that could be passed any day now by Congress. But there's a lot of money really pushing towards this new era of transportation, using electric vehicles, using different clean tech, and really advancing infrastructure in the United States.
So PAVE is the ETF that you've got there. That's had significant inflows now. You have $3 billion in that right now?
We have about $4 billion in that fund and about $4 billion in our lithium and battery tech fund. Those are our 2 largest funds, and collectively they've gathered about $4 billion in new assets this year. So there's a lot of investor appetite for this segment of the market.
Tell me a little bit, Christian, about the impact, and Jay, you're weighing on this, of Cathie Wood on thematic investing. She's sort of the big kahuna in this particular space. Has she helped popularize the concept of thematic investing, or is she sort of an unusual sort of comet that comes into the space? How would you characterize her impact on thematic investing?
Yeah, I think she's been quite bullish for thematic ETF investing. Previously, it was ruled, I think, by index-based ETFs, and she proved that you can be active in certain themes and create alpha. And her personality is one that has really kind of been synonymous with thematic investing or investing in innovation. We think that she's definitely been somebody who's been a champion for thematic ETF investing. If you look at ARKK, an unbelievable ETF. In fact, MVPs, some people compare ARKK to MVPs, our new thematic ETF. We have about a 28% overlap there. So some different opportunities between the two funds, but certainly Cathie has been kind of like the Peter Lynch of thematic investing.
Well, we've seen thematic investing really come into the limelight over the last 18 months or so. Prior to the pandemic, thematic ETFs, or thematic assets in ETFs, were about 0.5% of the total ETF industry. Now it's 2.2%, so still kind of small potatoes, but almost 4 times larger as a percentage of the ETF industry. So thematic has really become widely adopted as an accepted approach to portfolio management. We've seen active approaches work, we've seen passive approaches work, we've seen technology, we've seen non-technology themes really do well. So the entire ecosystem of thematic investing has really taken off in the last 18 months, and I think we're frankly just getting started. But there's been a lot of accelerants recently, whether that's Cathie Wood, whether that's the COVID-19 pandemic, really showing the value of thematic investing.
Now, Kristen, I'm looking at your largest holdings here, at Tesla, NVIDIA, Square, Amazon, Alphabet, Enphase Energy, Zscaler. Other than the fact that they're tech stocks, not a lot to tie them together. And this is going to rebalance every month, right? So this is next month we may have a different situation, right?
That's right. So kind of the beauty of this MVPs approach is it simply is looking at, the ETF ownership. So new funds or new themes launch, it gets included every month into the new portfolio. Something closes or scales down from a kind of a investor sentiment standpoint, the allocation reduces. So this is really kind of a core theme portfolio on an autopilot, again, just based off ETF ownership of the themes and the most valuable stocks kind of underlying these themes.
It's really a form of momentum investing, isn't it? I mean, it's not fair to say, you're not following necessarily price trends. It's really you're following ownership trends, but there's probably a relationship between ownership trends and price trends, right?
Yeah, I think so. Keep in mind the ETF space is also growing quickly in launching new themes, right? So we've launched a couple of new themes this year, GlobalX as well. So some of the ownership will actually result from just new themes being accessible to the ETF marketplace. I almost like to say this is a little bit like crowdsourcing. We've seen social media sentiment ETFs. This is really actual ETF ownership data that is powering these themes and the stocks underlying it.
Yeah, well, Christian mentioned, what's hot, what's next. You're pretty good at picking up on the trends. You create new ETFs all the time. What's on your radar right now?
So we just launched a hydrogen ETF. Now, to go back a little bit into history, 11 years ago last week, we launched a lithium and battery tech ETF, which we've been talking about. Over the course of 11 years, electric vehicles have gone from about 0% of the global auto industry to about 3% of the global auto industry. So when we talk about long-term thematic investing, we're really talking long-term, several decades. We think the next long-term trend is going to be the shift to hydrogen. Not necessarily displacing lithium batteries, but just a new form of clean power that can power trucks, that can power trains, that can power boats. It's really kind of a heavy industry form of a battery, frankly.
And what do you think of Elon Musk, who constantly puts down hydrogen? Obviously the guy's got a lot invested in electric vehicles, but is there anything to his idea that it's not really feasible on a big scale? What's wrong with his thinking?
They're not really apples to apples comparisons. So in a passenger vehicle, it does not make sense to have a fuel cell powered car. There's no infrastructure for it. A fuel cell itself is kind of large and unwieldy. But if you're looking at a truck, you don't want to have a huge battery on that truck, because just driving a truck in New York, you have a weight limit. So how much of that weight do you want to allocate to a battery powering that truck versus the cargo in the truck? A hydrogen fuel cell weighs very little, a big battery weighs a lot. So just from a pure efficiency perspective, heavy transport really favors hydrogen. On top of that, you see way more solar, you see way more wind that's being put onto the grid, that's creating power intermittently. How do you store that power? Hydrogen is actually a very efficient way of storing that excess power when it's not being used. You can put that hydrogen in a truck, you can ship it over to another country that maybe wants it, but it's a very efficient form of battery for excess renewable power. So Elon Musk, I think he makes a lot of sense on the passenger vehicle side, but hydrogen is very good in these heavy industry capacities.
Yeah. Christian, what's on your radar? What do you see on the horizon that's the next big thematic idea?
Yeah, so we, earlier this summer, we launched Detox, the cleaner living ETF that we've had a lot of interest in. It's not an ESG ETF, but it really appeals to a lot of people who are interested in ESG. And about a month from now, we're going to be launching our digital and online trading ETF. So this will be companies like a Coinbase, a Schwab, probably somebody like a Robinhood that allows, kind of this digital asset marketplace, online trading marketplace that's app friendly, mobile friendly. We think that's a fast growing area within financial services that is really capitalizing on the trend around the world for investors to trade stocks, bonds, commodities, cryptocurrencies, digital assets. And that will be a launch here in September.
Not to be boorish, but I am a Jack Bogle disciple, and one of Jack Bogle's favorite phrases was tinkering around the edges with portfolios. He was basically an index guy, and anytime you start talking about investing by portfolios or investing by sectors, he would point out that long-term there isn't a lot of evidence that that kind of investing works. Is there any evidence that this kind of investing, thematic investing, outperforms just buy and hold, S&P 500 kind of things, going back to Jack Bogle?
There is. I mean, one of the challenges for investors is that we talk about new themes all the time, and these new themes don't have a lot of track record. So we have to go to some of these earlier themes that have been around for 5 years, 10 years. We can look at the track record of lithium. We can look at the track record of some other funds like robotics or millennials or fintech that have been around for a while. By and large, the performance has been very good. One thing that I would suggest is, what are you comparing it to? Comparing a global robotics fund that is 50% Japanese equities doesn't necessarily make sense to compare to the S&P 500. But if you compare it to industrial stocks, the stocks that are being disrupted by robotics, you see a huge divergence in performance. Similarly with lithium, lithium is disrupting the energy industry. It's the oil companies that stand to lose. So if you compare lithium to the energy sector, it's a completely different tale of two industries.
Yeah, is that fair, Christian? I mean, what you're essentially doing is you're buying growth sectors at their early stages, hopefully, and that would make sense that there would be some outperformance. The question is, longer term, would that actually happen?
Yeah, I think Jay said it well. I think, thematic investing does introduce some more challenges like purity in terms of the underlying holdings, and as well as timing. So, for the average investor, I think they're probably best served by buying a broad-based kind of thematic ETF, something like an MVPs, for example. For others who maybe know certain market segments and feel like they can review purity, they can have an edge when it comes to timing, I think these underlying individual thematic ETFs have provided some substantial alpha. And, we've seen it even just coming out of the last 2 years with an up and down economy and a closing and a reopening. So it's definitely, I think, something that should be part of all investors' portfolios in one way or the other.
It's definitely hard to price a lot of these stocks. I mean, they don't, and particularly electric vehicles, they don't have any profits at all. The estimates could be years out. There's no PE ratio at all, essentially. So when you're dealing with these kinds of companies, it is a little difficult to figure out what the right price is, whether you're undervaluing them or whether you're overvaluing them, and of course it depends on your time frame. But it's a little tougher than when you're dealing with established companies. And
that's where I'd argue the opportunity is. A lot of these companies are less covered by analysts. They don't fit into classic sector definitions. More value-oriented conservative investors are going to look at something like a Tesla and say there's no value in this company, but they're not looking at what could happen in 10 years from now that completely changes not only this company, but perhaps the entire auto industry going forward?
Well, what I like most about thematic investing is it's understandable. The average investor can say, hey, I like cybersecurity, I like 3D printing, and there it is. The average investor thinks like that. The average investor does not think, let's buy consumer discretionary stocks. What does that mean? It doesn't mean anything to anybody. Even consumer staples, which sounds like you know what it is, doesn't really mean that much or elicit anybody's, get anybody particularly excited. So I like the concept a lot, and I like the idea of buying into growth stocks in the early stage. So I'm a very big backer of this, in case you haven't noticed, folks. And we're going to have a lot of new ideas. We're going to have Jay and Christian back many times to talk about what's going on there. And that's it for this week's ETF Edge. My thanks to Christian and Jay, my friends. And we've asked Jay to stick around and give us a little more insight into thematic investing on our ETF Edge podcast. And remember, you can see all of our videos on our website, etfedge.cnbc.com. Everybody have a healthy, happy, and safe trading week.
Get the ABCs of ETFs with the ETF Edge newsletter, your weekly update on the hottest trends in the nearly $4 trillion market of exchange-traded funds, expert analysis, actionable ideas, and exclusive insight from host Bob Pisani. Sign up now at cnbc.com/ETF Edge newsletter.